chapter 4 of your textbook. We're going to continue to talk about empowerment next week, but the two really go hand in hand. The strengths perspective is used to empower. So if you haven't already read chapter 4, pause this, go back and read it, jot down any questions you might have, and then come back and watch this. And then, of course, feel free to post any lingering questions or any additional questions that come up in the Q&A forum, and I will respond as soon as possible. Hold on. So the strengths perspective, your textbook says all people have a natural power within themselves that can be released. And when social workers support this inherent power, they enhance the probability for positive growth. So what does that mean? To me, it means that what you focus on will grow. And we're going to take that apart a little bit more as we go forward through the next few slides. So you may have entered this field to help people with their problems. After all, that's what social work was founded on. However, we found that focusing on people's problems can sometimes make them feel bigger. Even the word problem sounds permanent, like a permanent fixture. The word challenges, on the other hand, sounds like something you can work to overcome. Like a challenge can be a positive thing. It's an opportunity for growth. So can you think of ways to translate these problems into challenges or possibly even opportunities for growth? So this is really, the slide is describing the deficit perspective, which is what used to be used in social work, the focus on problems, the focus on the diagnosis or on homelessness, as opposed to the focus on the person who's experiencing homelessness. So these quotes here are things that some of you mentioned when you were starting out your internship during the first session of our HUS Duo 1 class. So I won't be good at it. I can't balance it all. It'll trigger my negative emotions from my past. I won't like it there. They won't like me. I won't know what to say. I'll be too shy. So just take a moment before you move on to the next slide and think about how these things might be able to be translated into challenges or opportunities. And then we have the strengths perspective way of viewing these things. So I'm learning new things. I'm gaining experience. I can make professional contacts and connections. I'm going to find out what I'm good at. I'm going to find out what I like. It can help me develop new skills. Quite simply, the strengths perspective is about reframing. It doesn't mean that we ignore challenges or we don't attend to pain. We use the strengths perspective in conjunction with ecosystems to see the person in their environment. And we use active listening skills that you've learned about and that you practice to attend to the client's feelings and to hear their concerns, and we want to validate those concerns. We use the strengths perspective to see the client as more than their problem. So it can be, again, easy to focus in on the problem. That's what we're there to work with, right? But we're not. We're there to work with the whole person, and people are more than their problems. So we want to see the entire person. We want to focus on the strengths. For example, reaching out for help in and of itself is a strength. So if you have a client sitting in front of you, they've made a positive move to ask for help. And even if it seems like everything else in their life might be falling apart right now, that is a strength that they've reached out to ask for help. Have you experienced a time in your past where you needed help, but you were afraid to ask? It might mean you didn't raise your hand in class when you had a question, or you didn't post a question on the discussion board because you didn't want everybody else to know you had a question, you didn't understand something. That expresses a vulnerability, and it can be scary. It can be scary to ask for help. Raising your hand or writing that post takes courage, and having courage is a strength. Asking for help is a strength. Anyone who's coming to you for help is demonstrating a strength in doing so. And even in the case of a mandated client, so for sure, by nature, if they're mandated, they didn't reach out and ask for help, at least not at this point. But if they're talking to you, they're putting in some kind of effort, right? If they're mandated and refusing to talk to you, then they're demonstrating a strong will. But if they are talking to you, then they're taking a chance. They're giving it a shot, and that, again, it's courage and it's strength. So these strengths can be translated into resources to help people achieve goals. So some assumptions. Clients have existing reservoirs of resources and competencies to draw upon. So again, every environment has strengths. And generally at every level of every environment. So a micro level strength might be asking for help or having courage. A meso level strength might be having a family that you get along with or having social support. And if the person doesn't have any kind of social support in their natural environment, it maybe they're able to develop that relationship between the client and the worker. So if they're able to develop a relationship with you, that means that they have some relational strengths, and that can be considered a meso level strength. A macro level strength might be the community agencies that the client can access, government benefits that they might be entitled to. So having access to Social Security or Medicare might be a macro level strength. Okay, each client has a distinct capacity for growth and change. Believing in strengths demonstrates respect for our clients and a belief that they can grow. Using the strengths perspective means that we can understand that the person is not the problem. It's the interaction between the person and the environment, a poor fit or lack of goodness of fit. So again, problems can occur within the transactions between systems rather than residing in deficient system functioning. So is the problem is not that the person is like a homeless person is not the problem. Homeless people are not the problem. The problem is that they can't find a home within our environment that fits their needs, that fits their fits their income guidelines. So it's a lack of fit. Okay. Collaboration augments existing strengths to build new resources. So using the strengths perspective requires that we collaborate with clients. Rather than putting ourselves in the expert role, the client is the expert on his or her own life, right? So you wouldn't want somebody that you just met to immediately start making judgments about you and telling you all about your life without listening, right? It's really important that we focus on the person. We focus on helping people identify goals and the steps they need to take to build their future. We want to help them grow their strengths. Okay, so we're building a vision of future possibilities, and practice process should focus on magnifying mastery and competence rather than correcting deficits. So again, that's really about helping people build their strengths. And turning a problem into a strength, like if a client presents to you and says, I just don't feel like I can go on, you can reframe that as a worker as, I'm so impressed by how far you've made it already. Like that demonstrates a lot of resilience, and that's a strength. So often people have been through a lot before they ever come to us, and some way or another they were getting there, they were making it through. So that in itself is also a strength. Okay, so empowerment. Focusing on an individual's strengths allows them to feel empowered, meaning that they can gain confidence to overcome and learn how to navigate resources to improve their situations. Confidence and access to resources builds power within a person, family, or community, hence the term empowerment, right? So it's building someone's power. I do want to note that there's some static around this word. Some people don't like the term empowered or empowerment because they think that it can kind of imply that we as the worker are giving people power. And if it's ours to give, that means we can take it away. And if that were the case, that would foster dependence on the worker. Instead, we're not giving people power, we're helping people uncover their own power. Power that was theirs, that was there all along, and it's theirs and they own it. So there are 3 different types of empowerment discussed in the book. Personal empowerment is when an individual gains confidence and experiences a sense of control within his or her own life. So there's an individual focus on personal empowerment. Okay, interpersonal empowerment is when a family or community improves their relationships, thus providing a sense of support and connection. So there's a focus on relationships. So this is what we're trying to build at the meso level. And then political empowerment is when changes occur on a large scale that allow opportunity to those that were previously denied those opportunities. So some examples of that might be legalization of same-sex marriage, or when segregation was outlawed and children who were previously, schools were divided between black and white. It was based on the color of your skin, and that became illegal. So it was no longer able to be determined what school you had to go to based on the color of your skin. So those are some examples of political empowerment. So you gained access on an individual level, but a community level. I hope that that makes sense. If you have questions about that, please post them on the discussion board. Okay, so power, oppression, and privilege. So some of these terms were reviewed in the last module, and it's really essential that you understand that you understand these. There's a constant interaction between people and their environment. So power means access, so access to information, to resources, to education, money, political influence. Sometimes money can give us power to have access to all of the rest of those things. Powerlessness is the opposite of that, so it's a lack of access. And it often results in self-blame, distrust, and or disengagement. So feeling powerless can cause people to not want to engage in the whole process because what's the point? And sometimes they can blame themselves or distrust the system. Oppression is economic, social, and psychological exploitation of others resulting in injustice. So this is racism, classism, ableism, heterosexism, sexism, ethnocentrism, etc. So ethnocentrism means when you value your own country above every other, and you might put down people from other cultures. Sexism is discriminating against somebody because of their gender. Heterosexism is discriminating against someone for their sexual orientation. Ableism is discriminating against someone because of a disability. Classism is discriminating against somebody because of their social class or socioeconomic status. And racism is discrimination based on race. Okay. Victim blaming. So those experiencing the problem are viewed as being at fault, incapable, unskilled, ignorant, etc. Victim blaming happens a lot, and it happens, it can occur at the macro level and at the micro level. So the same way oppression occurs at the macro level, but it impacts people on the meso level and the micro levels. They're inextricably linked, and we're going to talk within the coming few weeks, especially in your 201 class, where we actually can talk about the way that the macro and the micro are connected, because I want you to continue to focus on understanding those connections. But victim blaming can occur at the macro level in the sense that society maybe blames people who are homeless for their homelessness. It's based on the choices that they made, right? We live in a society where the American dream exists, and if you work hard enough and you focus hard enough, you're going to get ahead. But that doesn't happen for everybody. But then people can internalize that, or people might be blamed also at the micro level by one individual to another. So someone just saying, hey, this is your fault. You should be making better choices or different choices. And some people, well, let me pause there. We can expand on that conversation at another time. But I've also seen victim blaming perpetrated by a human service worker who wasn't aware of his own beliefs. So for example, a few years ago when I was working in residential care, there was a child care worker. So he wasn't a social worker, but he was still in a helping professional role. And on the news was, oh my gosh, of course I'm forgetting the guy's name now, but it was an NFL player who had beaten up his girlfriend in an elevator in Las Vegas, and it was all caught on camera, and they're playing it on the news. And so the kids at the residence are watching News 12, and they're seeing this come on there, and the child care worker says, well, it's her fault for staying with him. That's victim blaming. And I had to have a conversation with him about victim blaming, but also about the fact that he could have just really insulted the mom of one of the kids that was sitting there without ever meaning to. But that was a lack of self-awareness. That's his beliefs coming out. I hope he doesn't continue to carry that belief. I don't know that that conversation with me made a huge change, but here's hoping. Okay. The looking glass self. So this concept I don't think was actually included in your textbook, but I think it's a good way for us to understand how oppression and how these macro level things can have an impact on the individual level. The looking glass self is a concept that was developed by Charles Cooley, and it's the development of self and identity through interpersonal interactions and the larger societal context. So it's how people learn to see themselves based on how they're treated by others and the messages that they receive from society or the media about who they are. So for instance, body image. We're taught all the time by the media how, like, what is a desirable way to look, what we should look like, and then many people will lose confidence in their own body because maybe they're not a reflection of what they're seeing in magazines and on Instagram. And privilege, again, so we talked about this last week, but it's unearned social advantage that are bestowed upon a person because of a particular characteristic or trait. So this could be white privilege, it could be male privilege, it could be financial privilege, which is a big one also. There's lots of different ways that privilege can show itself, but there's also educational privilege. So for instance, I'm getting my doctorate. There's less than, I think it's less than 10% of the world has a doctorate. I'm in a place of educational privilege. I know I have more educational background than most people, and that can impact the way people see me, and it can impact the way I'm treated by other people in society. So empowerment-based practice is really at the core of social work. It's tied closely to the values and ethical principles described in the Code of Ethics. So simply put, empowerment-based workers collaborate with clients. They treat them as individuals who are the expert on their own lives. They understand that they have internal resources and help them recognize those resources so that they can make improvements within their environment to achieve their goals. So it's collaboration, it's strengths, and it's using ecosystems to find the strengths within the natural environment. Empowerment thinking. So we're going to talk, the next few slides are about empowerment thinking, empowerment doing, and empowerment being. So we're going to talk about what each of these things mean. So if you're thinking from an empowerment perspective, you're focusing on context. Human behavior is reciprocal and transactional, so everything has an impact on the world around it, and the world around you has an impact on your behavior. It links the personal with the political, so you understand how aspects of the macro system impact people on the micro level. It views all people and systems as having strength and potential. You're considering the power of language in shaping realities. So something as simple as reframing a problem as a challenge, right? That's the same, problem and challenge are kind of the same word for, different words for the same thing. But the language that we're using has a significant impact on how we're viewing it. We're elevating the voices of the clients. We want to make sure we're understanding the client as the expert, and we want to help them find their voice and communicate in ways and to people where they can use their strengths. We're deconstructing structural arrangements and the implications for well-being. So how is this happening? What are the structural causes that are contributing to this? This is something that you're going to focus a lot more on as you continue your education, so I don't want you to get stuck on it too much right now. Attending to intertwining oppression. So we're going to talk about intersectionality and intersectional oppression more in your 201 class within the next coming weeks. I really think this needs a conversation. It's difficult to understand through an online context. We're considering the intersectionality of social identities and questions about structural arrangements. So we're going to talk about these things more in your other class. Empowerment doing. So again, we're collaborating with others. This is what we do when we're coming from an empowerment perspective. We're facilitating a climate of empowerment rather than bestowing power or taking care of others. So again, we're not handing our power to somebody else. We're helping them find their own and grab hold of that. We're engaging in critical reflection. So this really takes a lot of, and praxis is kind of the same thing, right? Reflection, action, reflection. So being aware of our actions, being mindful of our actions, doing things intentionally, not letting our own opinions and beliefs be unchecked and come through so that we're putting our values onto somebody else. We're raising consciousness, so we're helping people understand the connections between the micro and the macro, and maybe helping people shift their looking glass self a little bit. Taking action, so working for justice and human rights. So these are the things that we do. And then empowerment being. So if you're doing micro level social work, so this is how you're going to be as a social worker. This is how you're feeling if you've experienced empowerment. So personal empowerment would include feeling like you've mastered a strength, or you've grown a skill, or you're competent in something. You're feeling more resilient. You're feeling more in control. You're increased your coping ability, and you've raised your consciousness. If you're experiencing interpersonal and familial empowerment, You're experiencing positive interactions and relationships with others. You're experiencing effective communication, and you're finding a social support network. You're experiencing a sense of connectedness and belonging, and you're experiencing a sense of respected status. So, and socio-political empowerment, if you're empowered on a socio-political or organizational level, you've removed power blocks, you've created opportunities in social structures, you're working toward social and economic justice. You're reducing the status hierarchy. You're protecting civil and human rights. So if you're experiencing these feelings, this is how you are. This is what you're feeling. Now, as a social worker, if you're doing micro-level social work, you want to help individuals to develop a sense of personal empowerment. So you want to help them recognize and build on their strengths and skills. You want to help them develop coping skills. You want to help them develop confidence that can help them feel a sense of control over their own lives. If you're working on the meso level as a social worker, you're aiming to help families and groups to develop a sense of interpersonal empowerment by improving their communication within the group or within the family, helping them develop, identify a sense of belonging and enhance their ability to support each other, right? So they're able to find their resources within and the strengths within those connections, which can have positive impacts in both directions. If you're working as a macro level social worker, you're working with communities or within the government, maybe as a political social worker, to increase opportunities, to protect human rights, and to reduce power dynamics. This is a list of the ethics of empowerment. It's specifically from your textbook. I don't have the page number in front of me, but care, autonomy, or independence, right? Power, change, critique, so able to understand and look objectively at what's happening, justice, contextual practice, so seeing people in context, inclusion, not separating anybody out because of a racial or ethnic group or membership in any other type of community. You are having respect for people, you're thinking critically, you're using praxis, which is, again, that's a fancy way of saying reflection, really. It's a little bit more intense than what we tend to think of as reflection, but that's ultimately what it means. Discourse, that means we're engaging in conversations. This is really how new knowledge is developed, by listening to the other side, listening to how people other than us are experiencing the world and experiencing things and trying to understand worldviews of people who are different from us. That's discourse. Anti-oppressive practice, so we're making sure that we are not reinforcing power dynamics through our practice, and that we're actively trying to raise people's awareness and consciousness of oppression. It means advocating for people, it means collaborating, and politicized practice. So again, that's kind of that anti-oppressive piece. It's understanding social justice, and it's working to try to create positive change in the world. So this is our final slide. I want you to review these in the text as well, where you can read about what they mean. And then you should also review the Code of Ethics. There is a link within the module this week. If you can't find it, it's there from last week. It's also in your resources folder, which you should see on your left-hand navigation panel. And I want you to think if you can find evidence of each of these ethics of empowerment within the Code of Ethics of the NASW.